Trooping the Color. Trooping of the Color Rehearsals Today 2023 Military Band, God Save the King. Metal barriers stood in neat lines, and signs showed roads would soon be closed. The air felt cool and still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. This was not an ordinary day. It was the day of the Trooping the Color rehearsal in 2023, and even though it was only practice, everything mattered. Soldiers arrived early, long before crowds or cameras. They came in groups, walking with purpose, their boots touching the ground in steady rhythm. No one rushed. No one spoke loudly. Each person knew exactly where to go. Their uniforms were clean and carefully prepared. Every button, every stripe, every detail showed respect for the tradition they were about to rehearse. For many of them, this was not their first rehearsal, but they treated it as seriously as the first time they ever wore the uniform. As the sky slowly changed from dark to light, the buildings around the palace began to glow softly. Streetlights faded one by one. The sound of vehicles was replaced by quiet commands and footsteps. Officers checked positions, watched movements, and gave instructions in calm voices. There was no anger, only focus. They understood that this ceremony carried the weight of history, and even a rehearsal needed to be near perfect. Trooping the Color is more than a parade. It is a tradition that has been practiced for generations. It represents duty, loyalty, and service. In 2023, it carried special meaning. It was one of the first times the rehearsal took place under a new king. This added a deeper sense of responsibility to everyone involved. The soldiers knew they were not just rehearsing movements, they were preparing to honor the crown and the people it represents. Along the wide roads, the guards began to form lines. They stood tall and still, even as the morning air brushed against their faces. Their expressions were serious, but inside, many felt pride. Some thought about their families who would later watch the ceremony on television. Others thought about the long training days that led to this moment. A few were first-timers, trying to calm their nerves by focusing on their breathing and posture. In the distance, the military band began to gather. Musicians carefully held their instruments, checking them one last time. The brass shone under the growing daylight. Drums were adjusted, straps tightened. Each musician understood that their music would guide the entire ceremony. Without the band, the parade would lose its heartbeat. Music was not just sound here. It was a signal, a guide, and a voice of tradition. The first notes of warm-up sounds floated through the air, soft at first, then stronger. These sounds echoed gently between buildings, filling the empty streets with life. Even without a large audience, the music felt powerful. It reminded everyone present why they were there. The melody carried respect, history, and unity. As the rehearsal officially began, the pace changed. Commands became sharper. Movements became synchronized. Lines straightened. Every step was measured. Soldiers marched forward, turned together, and stopped at the same moment. If one foot landed too early or too late, it was noticed. Corrections were made calmly and clearly. There was no room for carelessness. Nearby, a few early watchers stood quietly behind barriers. Some were local residents who had woken early just to catch a glimpse. Others were visitors who happened to be in the right place at the right time. They watched with curiosity and respect, understanding they were witnessing something special, even if it was only a rehearsal. Phones stayed mostly lowered. The moment felt too serious for noise. The flags were handled with great care. The color, which gives the ceremony its name, was treated with deep respect. Soldiers moved around it slowly and precisely. It was not just a piece of fabric, it represented the regiment's honor and history. Everyone involved knew its importance, and it showed in their careful actions. As the band prepared to play God Save the King, the atmosphere grew even more focused. This song marked a new chapter. Many of the soldiers had grown up hearing a different version of the anthem. Now they stood ready to perform it for a new era. When the music began, it was steady and strong. The sound traveled across the open space, touching everyone present. Some soldiers felt a quiet emotion rise in their chests, but they did not show it. Discipline required control, and they gave it fully. Their faces remained calm, their posture strong. Inside, however, many felt honored to be part of this moment in history. They knew people across the country and around the world would later watch the final ceremony. The rehearsal continued step by step. Marching formations moved across the ground like one single body. Horses, calm and well-trained, followed their paths smoothly, guided by riders who had spent years building trust with them. Every animal, like every person, was part of the larger picture. Nothing was left to chance. As time passed, the city around them slowly returned to life. Distant sounds of traffic and voices could be heard, but within the rehearsal area, focus never broke. Officers observed closely, making mental notes. Adjustments were planned. This was the purpose of rehearsal: to refine, to improve, to prepare. Eventually, the final movements of the morning were completed. The band lowered their instruments. Soldiers relaxed slightly, though they remained professional. There was no cheering, no celebration. Instead, there was a quiet understanding that progress had been made. Another step toward perfection was complete. As the soldiers began to disperse, the streets felt different again. The magic of the rehearsal lingered in the air. Those who witnessed it felt lucky, knowing they had seen something not everyone gets to see. For the soldiers, this was only the beginning. The real ceremony was still ahead, and it would demand even more focus. The city slowly moved forward with its day, but the memory of the morning stayed behind. The rehearsal had proven one thing clearly: tradition was alive, respected, and carefully protected. And when the time came for the world to watch, everything would be ready. The next phase of the rehearsal began after a short pause. The soldiers did not fully relax. They remained alert, knowing that every moment was important. Water was taken in small sips and uniforms were checked again. A loose strap was fixed, a glove adjusted, a hat straightened. These small actions showed how serious everyone was about their role. Even the smallest detail could affect the whole performance. Officers walked slowly along the lines, observing quietly. They did not shout or rush. Their eyes noticed everything: the straightness of a line, the timing of a turn, the balance of a step. When instructions were given, they were clear and respectful. The soldiers listened carefully, nodding once, showing they understood. There was trust between them, built through long hours of training together. Soon, the marching resumed. This time, the movements were longer and more complex. The soldiers marched across wider spaces, turning at exact points marked on the ground. Each step had a purpose. The sound of boots striking the road was steady and strong, creating a rhythm that matched the beat of the drums. It was like watching a single living shape move with perfect control. The military band took its position again. The musicians stood tall, instruments ready. Their faces showed calm concentration. They knew that their timing guided the soldiers. If the music was too fast or too slow, it could affect the entire formation. They practiced carefully, starting and stopping on command, repeating sections until everything matched perfectly. As the band played, the music echoed through the open space. Even in rehearsal, it sounded powerful. The melody carried confidence and pride. Some nearby workers paused to listen, even if only for a few seconds. The sound reminded everyone that this was not just a practice. It was preparation for a national moment. Horses and riders joined the rehearsal again. The horses moved with grace, clearly trained for this exact purpose. They were calm despite the noise and movement around them. Riders guided them gently, using quiet signals. The bond between horse and rider was clear. It came from years of trust, patience, and care. Every turn was smooth, every stop controlled. The rehearsal also included timing with vehicles and support teams. Everything had to work together. If one part moved too early or too late, it could cause confusion. The goal was harmony. Each group depended on the others. This teamwork showed the strength of preparation and planning behind the ceremony. As the rehearsal continued, small corrections were made. A line shifted slightly. A pause was added before a turn. These changes were discussed quickly and calmly. No one felt embarrassed or blamed. Everyone shared the same goal, to do their best. The atmosphere remained professional and focused. More people began to gather behind the barriers as the morning went on. Word had spread that something special was happening. Some people brought children, lifting them so they could see. Others stood quietly, watching with respect. They did not interrupt or distract. They understood this was a serious moment for those involved. The soldiers did not look toward the crowd. Their eyes stayed forward. Their minds stayed on their movements. Years of training helped them block out distractions. Still, many felt a quiet sense of pride knowing people were watching. It reminded them why their role mattered. At one point, the rehearsal paused again. Officers gathered briefly to discuss the next steps. The soldiers remained in position, standing still for long minutes. This showed their discipline and strength. Standing still is not easy, especially after hours of movement, but they did it without complaint. When the rehearsal restarted, the focus shifted to transitions. These were moments where one formation changed into another. These parts were often the most difficult. Timing had to be exact. Everyone had to trust the person beside them. Slowly, carefully, the transitions were practiced again and again until they looked smooth and natural. The band adjusted its music to match these changes. The musicians watched closely, ready to respond. Their coordination with the soldiers was impressive. It showed how deeply connected the different parts of the ceremony were. No one worked alone. As midday approached, the light grew brighter. The uniforms looked even more striking under the sun. The colors stood out against the pale buildings and wide streets. Sweat appeared on faces, but no one complained. The discomfort was part of the duty. They accepted it quietly. Some soldiers thought about the final ceremony that would take place soon. They imagined the larger crowd, the cameras, and the attention from around the world. This rehearsal was their chance to prepare mentally as well as physically. It helped calm nerves and build confidence. The anthem was practiced again. This time, it felt even stronger. The sound filled the space with meaning. Everyone stood a little taller. It was a reminder of why they were there, not for praise but for service. As the rehearsal came closer to its end, there was a sense of progress. Mistakes from earlier had been corrected. Movements looked cleaner. Timing felt right. Officers nodded quietly, satisfied with the improvement. There was still work to do, but the foundation was strong. Finally, the command was given to stand down. The soldiers slowly relaxed their posture, though they remained respectful. The band lowered their instruments. Horses were guided away calmly. The area slowly returned to a quieter state. People behind the barriers began to leave, talking softly about what they had seen. Many felt grateful for the unexpected experience. They knew they had witnessed something meaningful. For the soldiers and musicians, the day was not over. Equipment had to be checked, notes reviewed, and plans made for the next rehearsal. But as they moved away, there was a shared feeling of purpose. They were part of something important, something larger than themselves. This rehearsal was another step forward. It showed dedication, teamwork, and respect for tradition. With each practice, they moved closer to a ceremony that would honor the past and stand proudly in the present. As the rehearsal moved into its next stage, the focus slowly shifted toward the heart of the ceremony, the military band. By now, the soldiers were already warmed up, their movements steady and confident. The band members, however, knew this was the moment when all eyes, even during rehearsal, would naturally turn toward them. Music carried emotion, timing, and meaning. Without it, the ceremony would lose its soul. The musicians stood in formation, instruments held firmly but gently. Brass instruments caught the sunlight, reflecting small flashes of gold. Drummers checked their grips one last time, adjusting their stance. Every band member had practiced these pieces countless times, yet no one treated it casually. A single missed beat could affect hundreds of marching steps. Responsibility rested heavily on their shoulders. The conductor raised a hand slowly. In that simple movement there was authority and calm. When the signal came, the first clear notes filled the air. The sound was strong but controlled, spreading across the open space near the palace. Even people standing far away paused, turning their heads toward the music. It was impossible to ignore. As the band played, the soldiers responded naturally. Their steps matched the rhythm perfectly. It was as if the music guided their feet without effort. Years of training had built this connection. Soldiers and musicians did not need to look at each other. They felt the timing together. This silent understanding showed the power of practice and trust. The band moved forward slowly while playing, keeping perfect spacing between rows. This required deep concentration. Walking while playing an instrument was not easy, especially for long periods. Breathing had to be controlled. Posture had to remain strong. Still, the music never wavered. Each note sounded clear and confident. Among the musicians were individuals of different ages and backgrounds. Some were young, experiencing this scale of rehearsal for the first time. Others were veterans who had taken part in many ceremonies. Yet, in uniform, they all appeared equal. Experience showed not in attitude but in calmness. The older members quietly guided the younger ones through example rather than words. As the rehearsal continued, the band practiced several key pieces again and again. They adjusted volume, pace, and timing. Sometimes the conductor stopped them mid-piece, raising a hand. Instructions were given briefly. No one argued or complained. Corrections were accepted as part of the process. Improvement was the shared goal. The anthem held special importance. When it was time to rehearse it again, the atmosphere changed. Soldiers stood even straighter. Musicians focused deeply. The opening notes were played with respect and strength. This was not just music, it was a symbol of unity and continuity. The sound carried across the space, calm yet powerful. Some soldiers felt emotion rise quietly inside them. They had trained for years, prepared for moments like this. Hearing the anthem during rehearsal reminded them why they had chosen this path. Still, discipline kept their faces neutral. Emotion was felt, not shown. Behind the barriers, more people had gathered. Some stood silently, listening. Others whispered softly, careful not to disturb the moment. Children watched with wide eyes, fascinated by the music and movement. Even those who did not fully understand the tradition could feel its importance. The rehearsal included moments where the band had to stop playing while soldiers continued moving, then resume at the exact second needed. These moments required extreme focus. A second too early or too late could disrupt the entire formation. The musicians counted silently, eyes watching the conductor, ears listening for cues. When they rejoined perfectly, the result felt smooth and effortless. The sun climbed higher and the temperature rose. Sweat formed on faces, but uniforms remained neat. The musicians continued playing without letting discomfort affect their performance. Training had prepared them for long hours under pressure. They accepted the challenge quietly. Between pieces, the band rested briefly. Instruments were lowered carefully, never placed carelessly on the ground. Some musicians rolled their shoulders or took deep breaths. Others stayed still, conserving energy. Conversations were minimal. Focus remained strong. The rehearsal also tested endurance. Playing for extended periods required strength and breath control. The band pushed through fatigue, knowing the final ceremony would demand even more. This rehearsal allowed them to understand their limits and prepare to go beyond them. At one point, a slight timing issue appeared. The soldiers' steps were just ahead of the music. The conductor noticed immediately and stopped the rehearsal. There was no frustration, only problem-solving. They tried again, adjusting tempo slightly. This time, everything aligned perfectly. A quiet sense of satisfaction spread through the group. The band then practiced moving into position for the final stages of the ceremony. These movements were precise and required awareness of space. Each musician had to know exactly where to stand, when to turn, and how to move without breaking formation. They repeated these steps until they felt natural. As the afternoon approached, the rehearsal began to slow. The most demanding sections had been practiced. The sound of music faded gradually, replaced by spoken commands and the soft movement of people repositioning. Still, the presence of the band remained strong. Their role was complete for this phase, but their importance was clear. Officers spoke quietly with the conductor, reviewing notes. The band members listened carefully. Praise was given where deserved and small improvements were noted. The feedback was fair and encouraging. Everyone knew there would be more rehearsals, more chances to refine. When the band finally stood down, there was a quiet sense of achievement. Instruments were cleaned and checked again. Some musicians exchanged small smiles, careful not to break professionalism. They had performed well, but they knew the work was not finished. As they moved away from the rehearsal area, the echoes of the music seemed to linger in the air. The sound had filled the space with purpose and pride. Even after silence returned, the feeling remained. For the band, this rehearsal was a reminder of their responsibility. Their music would soon be heard by the world. It would guide the ceremony, honor tradition, and mark a moment in history. With each practice, they grew more prepared. The day continued, and the rehearsal moved forward, but the role of the band had left a strong impression. Music had once again proven its power, not just to entertain, but to unite movement, meaning, and memory into one living tradition. As the rehearsal entered its later stage, a different feeling settled over the area. The early excitement had turned into steady determination. Everyone involved now understood their roles clearly. This part of the rehearsal was about bringing everything together, soldiers, band, horses, timing, and space, as one complete picture. It was no longer about individual movements. It was about unity. The soldiers returned to their positions with quiet focus. Their uniforms still looked sharp, even after hours of work. Small signs of tiredness showed in their eyes, but their posture remained strong. Discipline carried them forward. They had trained for moments like this, learning how to stay calm and steady even when the body felt tired. Officers gave instructions with clear voices. These were not new commands. They were reminders, refinements, small adjustments meant to turn good performance into excellent performance. The soldiers listened closely. Each word mattered. A slight change in spacing or timing could make a big difference in how the ceremony looked to the public. The rehearsal now focused on flow. Movements were practiced from start to near finish without long stops. This helped everyone feel the natural rhythm of the ceremony. Marching began, continued, and transitioned smoothly. The sound of boots on the ground blended perfectly with the distant drum beats. Everything felt connected. The horses returned once more, calm and controlled. They had already spent hours around noise, movement, and crowds. Still, their riders stayed alert, guiding them gently. The horses moved with confidence, responding to quiet signals. Their presence added grace and strength to the scene. They were not just part of the ceremony, they were trusted partners. As the formations moved across the wide space, officers observed carefully from different angles. They watched how lines looked from the side, from the front, and from a distance. This was important. What felt correct up close might look uneven from far away. Small corrections were made to improve balance and symmetry. The band played again, this time with fewer stops. The music flowed naturally, guiding the pace of the march. Even after many repetitions, the sound remained strong. The musicians showed great control, adjusting volume and speed as needed. Their faces showed deep concentration, but also confidence. They knew they were doing well. More people had gathered behind the barriers now. Some had waited patiently for hours. Others arrived later, curious about the sounds and movement. Despite the growing crowd, there was no noise or disorder. People sensed the seriousness of the moment. They watched quietly, showing respect. Children pointed softly, whispering questions to parents. Older viewers stood with hands folded, eyes following the formations. Some took photos from a distance, careful not to distract anyone. Even as a rehearsal, the scene felt meaningful. Many knew they were seeing something rare. As the rehearsal continued, the sun began to lower slightly in the sky. The light softened, casting long shadows across the ground. This changed how the formations looked. Officers noticed this and made mental notes. Light conditions on the final day might be similar, and preparation mattered. The soldiers practiced standing still for long periods during certain parts. This was one of the hardest tasks. Muscles ached, but faces stayed calm. Standing still required just as much discipline as marching. It showed control, patience, and strength. No one broke position. During a short pause, water was offered again. The soldiers drank quietly, careful not to rush. The band members rested their arms briefly. Horses were checked and reassured. These moments were short but necessary. Then, the rehearsal resumed. The focus shifted to the final sequences of the ceremony. These were the moments that would stay in people's memories. Every step, every turn, every pause had to feel right. The soldiers moved carefully, trusting their training. The band supported them with steady music. At one point, a formation did not look as smooth as expected. The officer stopped the rehearsal. The issue was explained calmly. They tried again. This time, the movement flowed perfectly. A quiet sense of satisfaction spread through the group. Progress was clear. The rehearsal tested not only skill but teamwork. Everyone depended on each other. If one person made a mistake, others adjusted. There was no blame, only support. This shared responsibility built trust and confidence. As the afternoon moved on, fatigue grew stronger. Still, no one complained. They understood the importance of this moment. The final ceremony would represent the nation. This rehearsal was their chance to honor that responsibility. The anthem was rehearsed once more near the end. Even after hearing it many times, it still carried weight. The music rose gently, filling the space with calm strength. Soldiers stood tall. The band played with respect and care. The sound felt steady and reassuring. Some of the onlookers felt a quiet emotion during this moment. Even without the full ceremony, the meaning was clear. Tradition, service, and unity were all present in that sound. As the rehearsal began to close, officers gathered again, discussing what they had seen. Their expressions showed approval mixed with thoughtful focus. There were still small details to refine, but the overall performance was strong. The hard work was paying off. The command to stand down was given slowly. Soldiers relaxed slightly, shifting their weight. The band lowered their instruments carefully. Horses were guided away calmly. The space began to feel quieter, almost peaceful. People behind the barriers started to leave, talking softly among themselves. Many smiled, clearly impressed. Some said they felt lucky to have seen the rehearsal. Others planned to watch the final ceremony with a deeper understanding of what went into it. For the soldiers and musicians, the day was not finished yet. Equipment had to be stored, uniforms checked, and notes reviewed. Still, there was a sense of pride. They had given their best. As they moved away from the area, the feeling of unity remained strong. This rehearsal had shown how many people worked together to protect and present a long tradition. Each person, whether marching, playing music, guiding a horse, or giving instructions, played a role. The city slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of the rehearsal stayed behind. It had been a day of discipline, respect, and teamwork. With one final part still to prepare, everyone knew they were close to something special. As the final rehearsal day slowly came to an end, a calm and thoughtful mood spread across the area. The long hours of practice were behind them now. Everyone involved could feel it. This was the closing stage. The hard work, the discipline, and the careful planning had all led to this moment. What remained was reflection, responsibility, and quiet pride. The soldiers stood in smaller groups, no longer in full formation. Their movements were slower now, but still respectful. Uniforms were checked one last time. Gloves were removed carefully, hats adjusted, and equipment secured. Even after everything was finished, they treated their duties with care. This showed how deeply discipline was part of them. Officers walked among the soldiers, speaking quietly. Some gave final feedback, pointing out what had gone well and what still needed attention before the main ceremony. Their tone was calm and encouraging. They knew the group had performed strongly. These last words were not about pressure but about confidence. The military band gathered nearby, instruments safely in hand. Musicians wiped their instruments clean, checked cases, and helped one another pack up. Soft conversations replaced commands. There were no loud laughs, only gentle smiles and nods. They understood what they had achieved together. For many of the musicians, this rehearsal was a reminder of why they chose this path. Music had the power to guide movement, create emotion, and carry tradition forward. They had felt that power throughout the day. Soon, the same music would be played before the world. The horses were led away slowly, their riders giving them calm attention. The animals had performed well, staying focused despite noise and movement. Riders gently checked them, offering water and care. The bond between rider and horse was built on trust, and it showed clearly in these quiet moments. Behind the barriers, the last of the onlookers began to leave. Some paused to look back one final time. Others spoke softly about what they had seen. Many felt a deep respect for the effort and discipline involved. What looked smooth and effortless from the outside was the result of endless practice. A few children waved toward the soldiers. The soldiers did not wave back, but some offered small smiles once they were free to do so. Those simple moments stayed with the families who witnessed them. It was not just a rehearsal, it was a lesson in dedication and service. As the area cleared, the space felt almost empty. The sounds of marching boots and music were gone. In their place was silence, broken only by distant city noise. Yet the feeling of the day remained strong, like an echo that did not fade quickly. Some soldiers sat briefly, stretching their legs and shoulders. Others stood quietly, lost in thought. Each person reflected in their own way. Some thought about their families watching the final ceremony soon. Others thought about how far they had come in their training. A few simply enjoyed the calm after a demanding day. The rehearsal had tested not only physical strength but mental focus. Long hours of standing, marching, and listening required patience and control. Everyone had been pushed, but no one had stepped back. This shared challenge created a strong sense of unity. As plans for the final ceremony were discussed, there was confidence in the air. Small adjustments would be made, but nothing major. The foundation was strong. The movements were clean. The timing was steady. The music was powerful. All parts were ready to come together one final time. The anthem was mentioned again during discussions. Even without playing it, the meaning of it was present. It represented duty, continuity, and respect. Everyone understood the importance of playing and standing correctly when the time came. That moment would matter to many people beyond the rehearsal ground. As the group slowly began to leave, some soldiers walked together in silence. Others spoke quietly about small details, a step that felt better today, a turn that finally felt natural. These small conversations showed pride without boasting. They were satisfied but still focused. The city around them had fully returned to its normal pace. Cars moved freely again. Pedestrians walked without stopping. Many people would never know what had taken place there earlier in the day, but those who had been part of it would remember. For the organizers and officers, the rehearsal marked an important milestone. Months of planning had turned into action. Seeing everything work together confirmed their efforts. There was relief, but also responsibility. The final ceremony would soon arrive, and expectations would be high. As the sun lowered further, the light softened across the buildings. The rehearsal ground looked peaceful now. It was hard to imagine the energy that had filled it just hours earlier. Yet traces remained, faint marks on the ground, memories in the minds of those involved. Each soldier, musician, and writer carried something away from the day. Some carried confidence. Others carried lessons. All carried pride. They had honored a tradition that had existed long before them and would continue long after. The rehearsal had shown that tradition was not just about the past. It lived through the people who practiced it with care and respect. It survived because of discipline, teamwork, and commitment. Soon, the world would see the final ceremony. Crowds would gather. Cameras would record every movement. Music would rise once more. And when that moment came, those who had rehearsed would be ready. They would step forward with calm faces and steady hearts, knowing they had done everything possible to prepare. The rehearsal was complete. The tradition was ready. And as the last light faded from the sky, one truth remained clear. Behind every grand moment stood countless quiet hours of effort, shared by people united in purpose, proud to serve something greater than themselves.